In the summer of 1941, the largest invasion in human history was unleashed. Operation Barbarossa, the German assault on the Soviet Union, tore across the vast Eastern Front with shocking speed. Millions of soldiers moved relentlessly, capturing cities, towns, and villages, while the Soviet Union scrambled to respond. Amid the chaos, one city stood as both a symbol and a prize: Leningrad. Leningrad, today known as St. Petersburg, was far more than a population center. It was a city of history, industry, and pride, a cradle of the Bolshevik Revolution, and a vital hub for Soviet military production. Its shipyards maintained the Baltic Fleet, and its factories churned out weapons, tanks, and artillery. For the German High Command, capturing Leningrad was about both strategy and ideology. The city represented Soviet resilience and revolutionary spirit, and Hitler viewed it as a target that must be obliterated. As Army Group North advanced through the Baltic states, Soviet leadership knew time was slipping away. Citizens, men and women, old and young, were mobilized to defend their home. By midsummer, over 1 million civilians labored to build anti-tank ditches, fortifications, and barricades. Entire neighborhoods were converted into defensive positions, and factories shifted production from consumer goods to weapons of war. Despite the frantic defense, the German forces were relentless. By late July 1941, the Soviet troops managed to halt the Germans roughly 60 miles south of the city, buying precious time. But the reprieve was temporary. The German strategy was not to storm the city directly, it was to surround it, isolate it, and starve it into submission. Hitler's plan was chillingly simple and devastatingly effective. Cut off all supply routes, encircle the city with an iron ring of troops, and let hunger, disease, and the brutal Russian winter destroy the population. With this grim blueprint, the stage was set for what would become the longest siege in modern history, a trial of endurance and suffering unlike anything the world had ever seen. By August 1941, the German encirclement of Leningrad had tightened dramatically. Artillery shells began to rain down on vital infrastructure, cutting off electricity and destroying bridges. On August 29th, the town of MGA fell, severing the last operational railway connecting the city to the rest of the Soviet Union. With this, the Soviet supply lines were virtually gone, and panic began to spread among civilians and soldiers alike. On September 8, 1941, German troops reached the western shore of Lake Ladoga, completing the land encirclement. Nearly 3 million people were now trapped within the city limits. No reinforcements could arrive, no food convoys could enter, and the outside world could do little to help. The siege had officially begun. Just 2 days later, the German Air Force launched a massive bombing raid on the Barevsky warehouses, which stored the city's remaining reserves of flour, sugar, and other essential food supplies. Flames engulfed the stores, burning for hours and sending plumes of black smoke high into the sky. The warehouses were destroyed, leaving Leningrad with only what was on hand in households and small city stores. For most people, these supplies would last only a month, maybe two, under the harsh conditions to come. The city faced a grim reality. Starvation was now the primary weapon of the enemy. With railways destroyed, roads under fire, and warehouses in ashes, all routes for obtaining food were severed. Civilians and soldiers alike braced for a winter unlike any they had ever known, where hunger and cold would become as deadly as bullets and bombs. By late September, rationing was introduced, but it barely made a difference. Authorities were forced to strictly control every gram of food. The daily bread ration was established as the main source of calories, yet even this meager sustenance would soon prove insufficient. The siege was no longer just a military operation, it was a deliberate campaign to break the city's spirit and its population through deprivation and fear. As autumn of 1941 faded into winter, the true horror of the siege revealed itself. Leningrad was no longer just a city under attack. It had become a battlefield of survival, where civilians were the primary targets. By November, the municipal authorities implemented an official rationing system, designed to stretch dwindling supplies, but even this was barely enough to sustain life. At the height of that first winter, manual laborers received only 250 grams of bread per day. Office workers and their families, along with children, were given as little as 125 grams, a single dense slice, barely enough to stave off starvation. The bread was not pure, it was adulterated with sawdust, cellulose, and other fillers to make it last longer. It provided less than 500 calories daily, far below the minimum needed to survive, especially in freezing conditions. Temperatures plummeted, to minus 30 degrees Celsius, or minus 22 Fahrenheit, and with the city's heating system crippled, homes became death traps. Water pipes froze and burst, leaving many without access to drinking water. Desperate residents burned furniture, books, wooden floors, and even doors to stay warm. Entire buildings were dismantled for fuel. By January and February of 1942, the death toll soared. In these months alone, tens of thousands of civilians perished each week from starvation and cold. Corpses littered streets and homes. The sheer volume of death overwhelmed the few remaining burial teams. Families were forced to leave loved ones unburied, their bodies left where they fell. The scarcity of food and the extremity of conditions gave rise to horrifying acts of survival. Cannibalism, confirmed by police reports from the time, began to emerge among the most desperate. Ordinary citizens were confronted with impossible choices just to live another day. The city's population, once nearly 3 million, was slowly decimated, and the psychological toll on those who survived was immeasurable. Even as the city endured, the winter of 1941 to 1942 became infamous, not just for its temperatures, but for the relentless cruelty of a siege designed to break human will. Leningrad had become a city of shadows, its streets haunted by the living and the dead, as hunger and frost slowly claimed lives with terrifying regularity. By December of 1941, the frozen surface of Lake Ladoga offered a slim but vital chance for survival. With the city completely encircled and food reserves dwindling dangerously, Soviet engineers and planners created a daring supply route across the ice. This lifeline, quickly dubbed the Road of Life, became the only way to bring essential provisions into Leningrad and evacuate civilians from certain death. Convoys of trucks began crossing the treacherous frozen lake, braving bitter cold, shifting ice, and constant attacks from German artillery and aircraft. Temperatures often dropped below minus 30 degrees Celsius or minus 22 Fahrenheit, and the icy surface could crack without warning. Many vehicles, along with the courageous drivers, were lost when the ice gave way, plunging them into the freezing water below. Despite these dangers, the road provided a fragile yet crucial lifeline to the starving city. The Road of Life never delivered enough supplies to fully sustain Leningrad, but it allowed for modest increases in rations. By February 1942, the daily bread allocation rose slightly, providing just enough nutrition to keep the weakest alive. Even more importantly, it enabled the evacuation of more than 1 million people, primarily women, children, and the elderly. These evacuations saved countless lives that would otherwise have been lost to starvation, cold, or disease. The operation was remarkable not only for its scale, but for the extraordinary resilience of those involved. Drivers worked in shifts that often lasted for days, knowing that their cargo, meager sacks of flour, sugar, and potatoes, represented the only hope for survival. At the same time, icebreakers and Soviet military units worked tirelessly to maintain the route, ensuring it remained passable despite German bombardment and unpredictable weather conditions. While it was far from a complete solution, the Road of Life symbolized the determination and ingenuity of both the Soviet military and the citizens of Leningrad. It demonstrated that even in the darkest moments, hope could survive, and human effort could make the difference between life and death. It was a fragile thread connecting the besieged city to the outside world, a reminder that Leningrad, though starving and frozen, had not yet surrendered. By 1943, the tide of war on the Eastern Front was slowly beginning to shift. After more than a year of relentless siege, the German forces had failed to completely subdue Leningrad, and the Soviet High Command was ready to take decisive action. The first major breakthrough came in January 1943 with Operation Iskra, meaning spark. The goal of Operation Iskra was to open a narrow land corridor south of Lake Ladoga, piercing the German blockade and allowing larger, safer supplies to reach the city. Soviet troops from the Leningrad and Volkhov fronts attacked simultaneously from west and east, supported by massive artillery barrages. After 7 days of intense and bloody fighting, the two fronts met on January 18th, creating a corridor roughly 8 to 11 kilometers wide. The siege was not completely lifted, but for the first time in over 15 months, the city had a reliable supply route. Trains could bring in food and equipment, reducing dependence on the perilous Road of Life. The siege would finally be fully broken 1 year later. In January 1944, the Soviet forces launched a major offensive against Army Group North. After 2 weeks of relentless fighting, the German lines were pushed back, and on January 27, 1944, Leningrad was officially liberated. The city had endured 872 days of starvation, cold, and bombardment. The human cost was staggering. Before the war, Leningrad had nearly 3 million residents. By the end of the siege, only about 600,000 remained. Civilian deaths are estimated at between 800,000 and over 1 million, mostly from starvation, while military casualties add hundreds of thousands more. Combined, the total number of lives lost may have reached 1.5 million. Leningrad's suffering remains one of the deadliest episodes in modern history. Yet amidst the devastation, the city's story is also one of extraordinary resilience. Citizens continued to work, study, and create under unimaginable conditions. Musicians performed symphonies in freezing halls, scientists safeguarded priceless collections, and ordinary people dug through rubble, salvaged fuel, and endured extreme hunger without surrendering. The Siege of Leningrad is remembered not only for its staggering tragedy, but also as a testament to human endurance and the unbreakable spirit of a city determined to survive.